Your show will go live in 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1.
Okay, here we go.
Blog Talk Radio.
Well, good evening, folks. This is Dave Schmidt. I'm your host here again tonight on the Sedona Connection. We want to thank everybody for joining us here tonight. It's the August 7th program as we are here, and I'm still looking at my Facebook page wanting to see stuff come up there. That's kind of reacting a little bit slow, but I noticed some folks have already, put some messages in there. Now it's starting to do this little circle thing. There it is. Okay. Facebook. And folks, Blanca, how are you doing this fine evening? Now, excuse me, as I'm getting a little tongue-tied there. How are you doing there in Atlanta, Georgia tonight?
Doing great. Dave had a very good, productive day. We're in the hot temperatures during August, and so hot sun. The hot sun is really hot too. So it's nice to sit in the air conditioner here while we chat about interesting things as usual.
Sure, good. So, folks, for those of you that are on Facebook, I know now Blanca and I can listen to each other, and we always do our sound checks, but we always don't know what it sounds like out there. So if you could just, those of you listening, just send a little kind of a message, a chat message there on Facebook saying everything looks good, everything sounds good, and then I know I don't have to make any adjustments. That's always nice to know. So, but some of you are texting in and saying hi, so yes, it's great. Glad everybody's here tonight. I'm going to be doing something a little bit different. I'm hearing somebody's phone. Oh, that's my phone. I got to turn it off. Somebody's calling in and doesn't know that I'm doing my program right now. Okay, so that was my phone that was ringing in the background, and I turned that off. But yes, it's a little different here in Florida. This is the time of the year that we start getting the thunderstorms. You wake up in the morning and it's blue skies, and by the time you get around to 2 or 3 in the afternoon, the big dark clouds come in, and we usually have these huge monstrous thunder and lightning showers that will go on for maybe a half hour to an hour, and then it begins to clear up a little bit again in the evening. But this is the time of the year they say that it does that, and we've been having that basically almost every day for the last 4 or 5 days, and they're saying that's going to continue on for almost the next week. But okay, so this guy sent me a text message. He has no idea that I'm on my radio program, so he needs to be, but that's a different stuff. Right now the focus is here. So that's that. And I hop on the plane tomorrow, head to, I jokingly say, La La Land, Southern California, for Santa Ana, for the workshop there this weekend. And then 3 weeks after that, we're going to be in Chicago. Now, I made an announcement on the newsletter, and after Chicago, 3 weeks after that, we go to Australia. And I'm going to be there with some friends, and we have been invited to basically stop in Hawaii on the way home and spend some time there with a friend. Because, Hawaii gets a little expensive when you start staying there on the hotels and everything, but when you can stay in a friend's house, it kind of helps it out. And then they had brought us, you're already here, why don't you just do a workshop while you're here just as well? I thought, I can do that. So let's see, that we have Chicago, and then we have Australia, and then the last Saturday in September, I'm going to go ahead and do a workshop in Hawaii as well. Now, also, I've been putting out in the newsletter about the cruise coming up in November. Folks, I'm having some problems scheduling on that, so it's temporarily on hold. Hopefully, I'll have that all worked out within the next week about the cruise. So don't go making too many plans. Don't get your plane tickets or anything like that yet. So just be a little patient on it, because I have talked with the cruise folks, and we can continue signing up right up until the last day, as long as there's room on the ship, and there usually always is. So, but to get our group rate, that's a different story. So just be a little more patient with me on the cruise information. So that's pretty much all the announcements I've got here tonight. Blanca, anything else that you want to share with us?
No, I think that's good. It'd be nice if you have, of course, people like to hear your updates about currency or funds, and then it's going to be fun to see how previewing your workshop in segments is going to work out, because looks like people who may not have the opportunity to attend the workshop for whatever reason will now have another way to experience what you present. So
Yeah.
I think we've got some good things lined up.
Great. Well, thank you. Well, let me first give some updates on what's happening on the currency exchanges. There is nothing. There's no new news, folks. Let me just put it that way. Other than the fact that I can say this week, myself and another gentleman, we had the opportunity to meet with one of the top people who are involved in releasing all of these funds. I'm not at liberty to say anything about the meeting or who it was or anything like that, other than to say that these are the folks that we have always heard about, that are operating at the very top, predominantly with project funding. And we met with them this week, and I'm going to meet with them again next week when we get back, from Santa Ana. What I can say is that these are people that have the contacts with the people at the very, very top of our government. And then I'm not going to get into any more than that because of security reasons. But let's just say these are the guys that are in touch. They're in touch with what's going on out there. They know what's going on. They know what's taking place. I did ask them, this is about, do you have any time frame at all on the release of the fundings? And they said, no, we don't even know. And they did reiterate, yes, it's the people at the very, very top that in essence, if somebody's going to be pressing the button, it's the political people at the very top that will be doing that. And they're just not even saying anything because they don't want anything to leak out about when all this is going to come down to our level, where what we call it the spending level. I can say through some of my other contacts that we do have reports that the paymasters at the very top, now there are multiple levels of paymasters, but the paymasters at the very top have received funds into their accounts. Now they're holding on it and they're waiting, but the money is starting to move at that very top level. And I did get some good confirmation of that again this morning. But we have absolutely no idea how long it takes that to move down to us. I don't know if it could be 2 weeks or 5 months. I don't know. Because again, the decision makers are not leaking anything whatsoever about when that's going to happen. Okay? So that's the scoop that I have on that, on the currency exchange stuff. And then, Blanca, what was it? What else? I think there was one other topic. All of a sudden I'm going to blank here. That you thought I should.
Oh, yes, that you had the idea to start sharing segments of your workshop, and so that's different. And it's going to be interesting to see how, people who haven't had access to that content, how they're going to relate to it.
Yes.
And also people who have had a chance to go to the workshop, they now have a way to revisit the content.
Right. Well, about a year and a half ago, I went ahead and recorded. Now, there was no audience that was there. It was just me by myself. I recorded what was my first of the 2 of the 3 sessions of the workshop. And that content is probably about 3-4 hours maybe, total content that is there. And I've just kind of been waiting for the right time to be able to start doing, the programs with that content. I've had some in the past. I just haven't done them because of security reasons. Because we had some very security issues that were going on. Some of the content that I was sharing in the workshops was a little sensitive on the security stuff. I've been able to edit some of that stuff out there, but and I hadn't been doing programs every week because I thought, I don't need to do a radio program just to do a program. If I'm doing a program, I want there to be substance that is there, which means I have information that's substance to it, it's tangible to it, or else I've got some specific, other issues like, when I talked about the energy of money, a couple of weeks ago. Well, what I'm going to start doing now is that in some of those weeks where I don't have what is called, substantive content, I'm going to start doing the workshops content. Now, I will title these workshop contents and then part. And tonight, we're going to see part 1. So I've got about 24 minutes of recorded video that we're going to watch tonight. That's going to be part 1 of the workshop content. And for all you folks that have attended them, this will be a great repeat for you. But, the people that attend the workshops, when I do workshops, about 30 to 40% of the people are repeats because they absolutely love coming back because the content is so good because it helps put the big picture all together and all this. Well, so that's great for those of you who have been there, and for the rest of you that you haven't been able to make it, well, here you go. And this information will always be recorded. I record it here on the Facebook live streaming, and then I take that, and then from there I upload it, onto YouTube, but that's a couple days later, and then also repost it on my website. So the program that is recorded tonight will be on my YouTube page, it will be on Facebook, and then also I'll end up sending it out in a newsletter in a couple days when I'm able to edit, the live program. So with that, Blanca, is there anything else you want to share with us before we get started on the program?
No, I'm interested to see how this works. I'm curious.
Now, because this is a separate recording, folks, let me know if the sound is not quite, enough volume. And folks out there in Facebook, you can just send me little messages on that. So here we go. Let's go with the program tonight. Hello, folks. Dave Schmidt here. I'm here to announce that I am now able to start doing my workshops on video that I will be able to post on my website and my YouTube page. I've been doing these programs now for a little over 5 years, and I've been doing workshops for about 4.5 years. Over this period of time, simply by word of mouth, my newsletter list has grown to be just under 18,000 names on it. Obviously not all of those are very active, but what I get about 6,000 to 8,000 people every week that actually listen to the program or read the newsletters. Out of that, I've had a couple of thousand people attend the workshops I've been doing for about 4.5 years. I've had about 80 of those, predominantly all around the United States and with a few maybe even overseas. What I consistently get from the folks is that they're saying that this is one of the best things that they've ever attended. Because in the workshops, what I do, I give the full, complete message, the big picture about who we are, why we're here, where all this money is coming from, what's this person one of the best responses I've ever attended. Because in the workshop, I can what I do, I get has been able to share this openly and publicly, not necessarily for legal reasons, mostly for safety issues, because of some of the issues that involve around us. But I'm now at the point that I get to do this and share this with you. This will come in a number of a series of different videos. I will have them each around maybe a half hour to 45 minutes long, so that you can follow these in chunks. And this is the first one. This is the introductory video. Now, my business is called the Sedona Connection, and what I say is, welcome to discovering the new paradigms of money, life, and world affairs with what I present here. And what is it that's so unique about here on the Sedona Connection? Well, I live in Sedona, Arizona, and it's an absolutely wonderful, beautiful place to live. And it's something that's very unique about Sedona. It's not just the physical beauty, but it's really about the energy of this very, very sacred place. I've lived in Sedona now for about 6 years. And it's not just myself, but there's a number of us. We understand what takes place here. The real basis of all this difference, of what makes Sedona so unique, is its energy. And the energy is basically comes from the natural geography. Now you can see my banner in the back, and obviously what you see there is Cathedral Rock. That's basically the monarch of the Sedona area. But we live in about a 12-mile radius of these beautiful, beautiful red rocks that are very unique, that are nowhere else like this anywhere in North America, and supposedly there's only one other place that's similar down in South America, is what I've been told. But it's the natural geography here that creates something different. See, these red rocks are filled with copper and iron. Well, what's copper and iron? They're energy conductors, is what they are. They're like energy magnets. And then also here in the area, underground, are massive, massive concentrations of quartz crystals. What's a quartz crystal? An energy conductor, again. And when you get those two operating together, they draw in the electromagnetic energy of the earth, and they amplify everything that's taking place here on an energetic basis. So everything here vibrates slightly higher. I've had scores of people, friends, or people come and attend the workshops, and they've never been here, and they get there and they say, this place is different. They feel the energy. Some of them actually feel their bodies vibrating at a much higher level, because it does that. It vibrates everything here at a higher level than almost everything else around it. And yes, it's a small area. It's only around 12 square miles. But this is not something that's just a short period of time. This has been this way for thousands and thousands of years. In fact, the Native Americans in the area, to them, this has always been one of the most sacred places on this planet, let alone North America. I've developed a friendship with a gentleman by the name of Mark Pinkham. Now, Mark is a specialist and an expert upon the Sedona area. He's lived here since the late 80s. He's done extensive research of what goes on here. He's developed relationships with the local Hopi tribes and their oral historians, because as we know, Native Americans pass their history on generation to generation orally. And they don't always talk about that out in the open and let all that out to the public, but they do periodically give certain individuals that they can trust this information. Well, Mark is one of those. Mark has written a book called Sedona, City of the Star People, and about the history of this area that goes back over 25,000 years. And in that, he said there was a period of time for thousands of years that all of the native tribes in North America, at least once in their lifetime, had to make a journey to what is called the Red House, Sedona, the Red House, the Red Rocks that are all around us. And it was like a Mecca journey for them. Because all the tribes in North America treated this place as a very, very sacred place. And it was so sacred, they would not live here. They had such a deep respect for it. There was always a group of caretakers, maybe around 40 or 50, that lived here, and they would be basically those that would welcome the tribes when they came in. They were the hosts. They were the ones that would help them through the area. And they would come and they would stay here from anywhere from 3 weeks up to 3 and 4 months and take in the energy of this wonderful, beautiful place. It's a healing center as well, and it's known for that. And that's why it's not a coincidence that Sedona has basically been one of the strongest metaphysical healing centers anywhere on this planet. It's a wonderful place. It was something that I was drawn to. It pulled me into this place to be here. I love being here. This is my home. I don't need to go into all the extensions of other things I could share about it, but also those of us that are here and some of the friends that I work with, we know what's coming as well. As we're moving into this new age and this new era, and these funds are going to be released, Sedona will continue its extension as a healing center. We have plans on bringing in all of the new prototypes, all of the examples, all the new types of healing apparatuses and healing modalities that are available, whether they would be metaphysical and spiritual-based healings and energy-based healings, or even the new physical-based healing modalities that will be available to us. We're here to bring those to us. Okay. Now I need to take just a break here. Let me see what happened here on that. I needed my laptop. The video had gone out, so I just had to make sure everything was okay. But we're doing good. So Sedona is a wonderful place. I always have workshops here about once every 3 or 4 months, and you're always invited to come here, and you would begin to experience the uniqueness of this place if you haven't been here. So that's why I call myself the Business of the Sedona Connection. And there's this great quote that we have that comes out of the New York Times, and it basically says that God created the Grand Canyon, but he lives in Sedona. Now what I want to share with you is a short video. This is about a 2-minute video that's put out by the Sedona Chamber of Commerce. So enjoy this video, folks.
You are so beautiful, so majestical. There is no one quite like you. So many different ways you find capture a heart like mine. I'm loving this adventure with you. I wanna stay like this forever, underneath your never-ending sky. Just you and me together. This is peace, this is love, this is life. Climbing on your rocks and stones, hanging on your mountain tops. This love no one can define. Please don't mind if I stir, swimming in your river. I can't get you off of my mind. I wanna stay like this forever, underneath your never-ending sky. Just you and me together. This is peace, this is love, this is life. This is peace, this is love, this is life. This is peace, this is love. This is life.
Okay, so at this point in the workshop, I go in and I start talking and discussing what's really happening with the currency exchanges that are out there that we've all talked about, what we've heard. And what I want to do here, and this is the time that also I take questions and answers. I give all my preliminary comments, I give the latest updates that are going on, and I take questions and answers from folks. Well, you don't have that opportunity to do this with the video. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you the background about how did we get here and all this stuff about trading in these dinar and these zims and the dongs that we've heard about. Well, what we see through history, and predominantly in the last century, is that when countries go into wars, what is called the opposing forces that are outside the scope of the mainstream of the countries, the United Nations comes in together and they devalue their currencies. Now that happened to both Japan and Germany in World War II. Their currencies were no longer tradable on the open foreign exchange market because basically the organizations totally devalued them. And then once the war is over and the countries, their sovereignty is reinstated, then their currencies are reinstated again back to the value of where they were prior to that. That happened with Germany and Japan in World War II. Then in 1989 and 90, we had what was called the First Persian Gulf War. And that's when Saddam Hussein of Iraq had gone in and attacked and basically took over the country of Kuwait. Totally took over the country. Kuwait lost its sovereignty. And the Kuwaiti dinar at that time was one of the most valuable currencies in the world. It was costing in the area of around $3.45 to purchase one Kuwaiti dinar. So Saddam went in, raided all the banks in Kuwait, took all the Kuwaiti dinar, and he was going to use that money to basically purchase more guns, tanks, ammunition, and etc. for his warring effort. When that happened, the United Nations stepped in a cooperative agreement and totally devalued the Kuwaiti dinar. It went from $3.45 down to a nickel, 5 cents, overnight. So no longer this Kuwaiti dinar didn't have any value to it. Well, when we look at that, we knew that what we would call the political insiders, the government insiders, the military insiders, they knew that this currency was going to be reinstated when this war was over. And so what you had were these political elite and wealthy insiders that went out and bought up millions and millions, if not billions, of Kuwaiti dinar. And then after about 6 months, when the war was over, it was reinstated back to its $3.45. So what they bought as a nickel overnight became worth $3.45. And so you can see what happened, an explosion. At that time, the internet was not available to the masses, so we didn't have the ability to share this with everyday people like you and me and spread it out around the world and share it with our friends and be able to verify what was going on. But there were some individuals, everyday common folks like you and me, that were able to take advantage of this. And those were predominantly the military people that were stationed in Kuwait during that war. And there were some of them that, yes, they'd go out and they'd buy 1 million, 5 million, 10 million dinar, Kuwaiti dinar, at 5 cents. And then when the war was over, they became multimillionaires. There wasn't a lot of them, but there was some. I've even had a gentleman on my radio program that was one of those. And he said, yes, I was a staff sergeant in the Army. I was stationed that was there. I did a tour of duty that was there. We had heard about this, that there's a possibility. So I went out and bought a couple million dinar. And when it went from a nickel to $3.45 overnight, boom, I became a multimillionaire. At that time, you couldn't go take this dinar into a bank and turn it in. You had to be in country, in Kuwait. But there was a small percentage of people that became, everyday people like you and me, that became overnight millionaires in this process. Well, so now we advance to the second Gulf War, the Iraqi War, that came out around 2004. And the rumors started spreading that this was going to happen again. But now we have the internet. and people can talk to each other, and they can discuss this, and they can be aware of what's going on. So here now, you're getting large amounts of everyday people that start buying this Iraqi dinar that was again valued very similar to the Kuwaiti dinar. My understanding, it was around $3.25 at that time, $3.25. And they could basically get it for nothing. Well, what happened is when we came into the United States, and ourselves and others, and we basically took over the country of Iraq, the old Kuwaiti dinar currency went out of circulation, no longer had value. And they came up with a new circulation. And these new ones have these very high denomination amounts. 100,000 dinar, 50,000, 20, 10,000, etc. But the people were thinking that that was going to happen again, and they could go out and buy 100,000 dinar for about, I should say no, 25,000, I was wrong. A 25,000 dinar note, that's the highest one. They could buy a 25,000 dinar note for about 1/10 of a penny. So a 25,000 dinar note would cost them about $25. Those are rounded amounts. And that they thought that was going to turn into $3.25. This went on for 3 or 4 years, quietly, but it started growing and expanding. And I heard about that, and I had somebody explain this to me, and I said, wait a minute. You buy it at 1/10 of a penny, and you get to turn it in and get $3.25 for it. Who's making up the difference? Who's coming up with the billions and billions of dollars to pay for the difference in that amount? Somebody has to pay for that. And that's why I didn't pay much attention to it, because I said this just didn't make sense financially, because this money just doesn't grow on trees and come up out of thin air to pay for this. And I was talking with a friend about it who had bought some, and she started explaining what was at that time, they were talking about was the oil credit contracts between the United States, Iraq, and China, and that they were going to give credits to oil based on the purchases of the Iraqi dinar, and that was going to provide the funding for the increase that was going to take place. Behind the scenes, yes, it was the elite and the powerful government folks that were doing this, and were planning on coming out with billions of dollars again. Well, I said that made sense to me, so I'll give it a try. And so I bought a little bit of dinar, and then I started reading and listening to all the blog sites of the stuff that was going on. At that time, the rates were still reasonable, because they were saying, yes, it was going to be about $3.25 to $3.40, somewhere in there roughly is what its value was going to be. Then all of a sudden, they started reporting it was going to be $5, $10, $20, and it went all the way up to $36 per dinar. I said, this is crazy. This is crazy. That kind of money is not realistic to tell. Well, at this point in time, I had been into this about, probably about 5 or 6 months. And I had some friends that were involved in the whole process here. I want to shift this just a little bit to balance this out. Oh, there we go. Let's go back to there, okay? And I had some friends that were involved in this for just a little bit. And this one article came out that talked about the banking process and how people were going to get paid and what was going to take place. Well, I had a background in banking and finance. And I said, this is crazy. The banks don't operate this way. That's not how they do this. And I had about 30 friends that I was communicating with in Sedona that had purchased some dinar, and we were basically communicating with each other, keeping each other up to breast of what was developing and going on. And I felt inspired to sit down and basically write a letter to them saying, this is crazy. It doesn't work this way, folks. This is not what really goes on. And as I sat down and started writing this letter, it really was one of those very deep inspirational moments where I felt like the information was just being downloaded to me. And I just started writing as the flow was coming to me. And after writing it and going through it a number of times and editing and re-editing it all, I ended up with basically what was about a 12-page letter that turned out to be an article. All I did was send it to my 30 friends. And the next thing I know, one of them, and I still don't know who it is today, put it out and had it posted on 2 of the primary dinar blog sites. And the next thing that I know is within 10 days, I had received over 1,000 emails of saying, thank you, thank you, thank you. What you're saying makes sense. This is very understandable, very reasonable, and you're totally making sense of this whole process. And at that time, it did make sense. And that, folks, was now approaching almost 6 years ago. I did that in October of 5 years ago, I'm sorry. October of 2013 is when I wrote that. And the next thing you know, that opened up for me to do my radio program that I started doing. And within a year and a half, I had over 8,000 to 10,000 people a week listening to my radio program. I'm talking about this, and I'm learning and moving along just like you. Well, being a public face in this process, and for the most part, with a few exceptions, I was the only person that was giving my real name and also using video out there in what I was talking about in this process. You went to these Dinar Guru blog sites, the vast majority of them were using pseudonyms, or basically what is called their pen names. They weren't using their real name and their real face. I was. And by doing that, it gave what is called a credibility of trust to what I was saying. And the list began to grow and to grow. In this process is when I got contacted by people who represent the dragon families. And I started developing the relationship with them. And I started learning, where is this real money? I had heard about these stories of these dragon families, but now I was in direct contact and communication with them. I had come to understand where these dragon families had come from, how they had all this gold, and why they were beginning to release that. Now, that information I will predominantly get into in the later parts of the workshop, where I talk about the gold and the dragon families, why they have it, why it's ready in time to release it, etc. But what I did come to realize is that how real they were. I have made 4 trips to Hong Kong in meeting with them. I now have direct relationships with people who work directly for them at the very high sources. I had come to realize there were a lot of stories about the dragon families. And the reality is very few of those stories that people could back them up with hard, tangible evidence that they were in direct contact with the real people of the real money. You see, when it comes to these currency exchanges, at the end of the day, somebody has to pay for it. Somebody is going to have to come up with not billions, but trillions, and even possibly even up to the amount of quadrillion dollars to pay for this. Now, why do I say that? Because if you're reading what's taking place on all these dinar blog sites, they talk about the 800 numbers that are coming out and the rates that people are going to get paid and how they're going to get all this money and where it's going to come from. Well, if you just simply do the math on what they are talking about and the number of people out there that have purchased these currencies and the amount of currency that is out there, it's going to take over $250 million to pay for it. Now, folks, that ain't going to happen. It is not going to happen. But what I did come to understand is there are these real families with these massive, massive amounts of wealth and gold that they have considered themselves guardians and caretakers of for hundreds of years, if not thousands of years, waiting to release it at the right, appropriate time. To create this shift for us as the human race, to help us move us out of what are called the hundreds, if not thousands of years of different forms of financial slavery that we have been in, and now moving into what is called our evolutionary process. If we don't understand the dominance of the elite, what we call the cabal, those are the elite, the very wealthy, powerful elite that really run and control everything that goes on in our world. In fact, they even control the politics and the governments as well. That's a part of what is called the shadow world. They're out there and they're very real. But so are the benevolent dragon families that have these massive amounts of wealth. And it's time. It's time to go through this shift and change. I don't know all the details, and there's only so much that they're going to share with me because some of this is very private. And this currency exchange is not just a simple process. Yes, there are the families that have this massive amount of wealth, and I have met face to face with the gentleman who is directly related to the one they call the Papa, the grandfather, the head of the dragon families. And he has told me face to face, and he says, I have had direct meetings with the CEO of a very, very large bank in Hong Kong, and they have told us that we have more money in their bank than anybody in the world. And it's been talked about by other sources, and it's now starting to come out as well, that they have in the areas bank accounts that have 40, 50, and 60 zeros in them, folks. Try to wrap your head around that. They have that. And it's been confirmed by other sources as well, not just me. There's a timing in releasing all this money. And this is the time that we're ready for this shift and change that's taking place for us now. Excuse me here just a minute. I need to just do a little sit there and check. Okay, folks, that's the end of part 1 on the workshop and the information that I'm going to be sharing. And what you see there is the background and the history and how all this came about and how I got involved in this and the background and the history of the dragon families that have all this money. Now, part 2 will be a continuation of what I just said there, and we get into why it's coming. I mean, how did we get into this position of what we call about what I call what is hundreds, if not thousands, of years of financial slavery as a humanity, as a human race, and the timing of the shift that is taking place. That's basically going to be the stuff that's in part 2. But with that, Blanca, why don't you come back on and join me and just share your comments about what we shared there tonight?
Well, it's interesting. Some of the topics that you brought up have been consistent not only in the workshop but your shows, because when you were introducing Sedona and what was unique about Sedona, you were talking about energy and electromagnetism, and then you were also talking about shifting and changing when you got into this topic of the monies and the dragon family being caretakers and wanting to release funds when the time was right. You linked it with the idea of a shift and change in humanity, in consciousness and the way of life. So are these key themes that you're going to continue to cycle through and expand as we see more about what's going on in your workshop?
Yes, those will be covered in greater detail about why the timing is there and why the funds are coming forward and what's the purpose of it. And because it's not just, they're just going to dump a bunch of money out there so that people can get rich. In the bigger picture, it's because we as a human race are ready to go through what's called another evolutionary shift and change of ages, of eras, if you want to call them that. You'll see in the next one I talk about that 26,000 year cycle that we go through. That means that we're going to go through a shift in era, and what it really comes down to, it's not so much about the money as much as it is about the shift of our consciousness. We wake up, we become more conscious, we become more aware. And the real purpose of the money is to help set us free from these hundreds, if not over 1,000 years of what we call financial slavery. The different forms of financial slavery that's been placed upon us by these elite, what we call the cabal. And by being independently wealthy, by having money where you don't have to work, then we have the time and the resources to do the inner work, the consciousness work that is necessary. And we get to be the group of people who are basically the forerunners, the precursors to this shift and change on the early process. And I've mentioned in other programs, this is a shift and a process of these funds being released that will go on for a couple decades. But so tonight we saw basically the introduction to that is what we saw. So
the other thing that I thought was key, because again, as I've been working with you, gosh, I think it's 3 years, if not more. It doesn't seem that long, but when I start adding it up.
Yeah.
But one thing that you said, which I have seen, and I'm sure people who've been working with you longer, and I appreciate it, and I think others do too. You said, I'm learning and moving along with you. So I have seen that as you learn something different or make a different contact or have a different awareness or discover that an information source wasn't as good as you thought, you were always upfront in sharing it with us. So I think that's an important thing for people to understand in terms of what type of messenger you are about these particular topics.
Well, it was interesting because the meetings I had with the people I was with this week, we talked about how because they said the same thing, it's a learning curve and a learning process for them as well. But what we run into is that we run into people that are good information sources. They're good content people. They have deep contacts of information and content, but they're rarely people that can get anything done. They're how do I say this? I want to be careful how I say this. They're kind of wannabes, if I can say that in a polite manner. They know people, they're connected with people, they have great information, but when it comes down to getting the stuff done, they're not in the decision-making process of getting stuff done. And what's nice is the people that I met with last week and meeting again with this week, these are the people that get stuff done. And so it's really nice to know that, to be at that place. But that has been the process as I've come along, and some of these great information sources, they were valuable in my process of learning all of this. They were great because, you know, I'd take what I learned from them, the information that they had, I would verify it, double check it, run it by others, and it always seemed to make sense. But when it came down to the end of the day, they had no decision-making authority about releasing of funds, none whatsoever. And so I thought, okay, thank you very much, and I would kind of just politely just move on because other sources would start coming my way. And that's happened to me about 3 or 4 times in this process over these years. But it's nice that I absolutely believe now I'm finally in touch with the people who are the ones who can get stuff done. But I have to be very careful about what I talk on that. I'm not at liberty to go into details on any of that. But it also kind of is a reflection of how close we are. At least it is to me. So, yeah. Okay. Anything else you'd like to share with us?
Yeah. Well, the other thing, because it's nice for these things so that people can kind of take it to heart and think about it. You mentioned that in this topic of currency exchange and shifting of the currencies and what's going to be done about currencies, and there's all kinds of voices out there. And number one, like you said, you've always used your real name. People have seen you in person and talked to you in the flesh. You're not a hologram yet. I know that's
Thank you.
But so you're a real life person, and people have contact with you. And the other thing that I find interesting is you keep on with these, especially as of late, the updates that you provide. You say, well, things are in progress. Things are in place, no one's talking, and yet you can go to, I imagine, like 40 websites, and they're all claiming all kinds of things, so that's quite a contrast.
Yeah, and they usually say the same thing every week. It's happening next week, and they've been saying that for 5 and 6 years, and it never happens. So when you get that type of, you know, just absolutely horrible repetitiveness, that tells me they're either absolutely crazy, they're living in a fantasy land, or they've got people that are deliberately misleading them with the information that they're giving out, because it's just crazy for them to be saying week after week, year after year, the 800 numbers are coming out next week, when they never do. You know, how long are you going to listen to that crazy stuff? You know, how long is there credibility that's in that? But people do what they do. For some people, you know, it's all that they know. And when I started challenging, this was, 4 or 5 years ago, when I was challenging them on like, hey, where's your money coming from? Who's going to pay for all this? They shut me down and they banned me from their blog sites. So you noticed my programs never get posted on their sites because they banned me because I challenged them with the truth, and they don't want to face into it. So yeah, and I'm not going to go into any more. That's enough on that. So
right. So I'm just bringing up some of the things. If people haven't seen your workshop, some of the things that you able to distinguish, and it's been a consistent thing. So this is the interesting, and then the other interesting thing, so that people can see how your life evolved, and I've seen it in just a few years that I've known you, that you were talking about Sedona, which of course is a lovely place. It's magnificent, very unique. But now you're not there anymore.
Yeah.
So your life has taken you somewhere. That's a demonstration that everybody's going through a lot of change, and that you are on a particular trajectory that sometimes you don't even know where you're going to end up.
I love Sedona, and I will always love Sedona, but I'm not married to it, and I don't have to be there. And you know, I'm single and I'm not attached to anything, so it was very easy for me to pick up and go. And it's beneficial for me to be here where I am right now, and I'm enjoying it here in Southern Florida. It's nice to be here. It's a great experience. It's a great change for me. So yeah.
Right. I think you being on the East Coast is good because now you're up real late along with me.
I know. We were talking about that. You know, for all these years I was doing the program would start at 6 o'clock or 7 o'clock. Well, now it starts at 9 o'clock, you know, for me. I thought, that's a little different, but
Right.
yeah, I mean, I don't know how long I'll be here. I'll eventually always go back to Sedona. That's probably always home for me. But as I said, nothing ties me down. I'm very flexible, so it's just a nice change, and I'm enjoying it here. So yeah.
Right. Florida's really special too, and there
Yes.
were a lot of different things that also you being in Florida is advantageous.
Yes.
So it
Yeah.
just kind of made all kinds of sense. But those are the things that I kind of found interesting in the first section that you shared. It was nice to hear it and see how some of the things are still continuing and setting up for what we may be seeing.
Yes. Okay. Well, anything else you want to share with us tonight, or are we ready to call the program a quits? Because we've been going for about 45 minutes.
I think that's good. It was
Okay.
a nice chunk. It's going to be
All right.
nice to see people how they enjoy this aspect of the show.
Well, I like keeping these programs a little shorter because then it's easier for people to listen to. Because it's easy for you to listen to a half hour to 45-minute program. But when you start getting into 1 hour and 2 hours, it's kind of inconvenient on people's time schedules. So that's why I try to keep these into shorter segments. So, well, with that, folks, thank you very much for joining us again tonight. This was part 1 of workshop content. Next week we'll probably be back with part 2. But with that, we'll see you next week on the Sedona Connection. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, bye-bye.